So yeah, I'm happy to have you here and eager to listen to what is happening in Latin America.
Thanks, Roberto. Marcelo?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, right. Hi, I'm Marcelo Gaudos. I'm currently a researcher at University of Leeds in the UK in a joint position with the UK Met Office. I'm a soil scientist, crop and soils modeler. Been collaborating in AgMIP for a bit. I'm originally Brazilian. I've developed a research career in bioenergy crops in Brazil, and I'm currently leading a project funded by the Newton Fund in Brazil, modeling soya, maize, sugarcane, and sorghum in a semi-arid region, the northeastern area of Brazil. So I think that will be relevant for the topic on adaptation and mitigation. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And a quick introduction of myself. I'm Kelly Witkowski. I currently lead the Climate Change and Natural Resource Program at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. And I'm based in Costa Rica, and we support a lot of the different governments with their national adaptation and mitigation plans for the agricultural sector in the Americas. I saw Claire there.
Hi, sorry it took me a minute to unmute myself. Yeah, I'm Claire Svetanovich. I'm at the USDA, where I focus on climate policy in the Foreign Agriculture Services Multilateral Affairs Division. And I'm the US Ag negotiator in the UNFCCC as of 6 months ago. And also, interestingly, a graduate of Oregon State's College of Applied Economics. So nice to see a fellow Oregon State representative. And I'm just in listening mode today, but I'm very excited to see what you guys discuss.
Great, thanks. Good to hear you, Claire. We've got Hayden, who I think you also heard, but Hayden, you want to just give a brief introduction of your interest in the region?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Hayden Montgomery, representative of the Global Research Alliance. I chose this region because, well, I've worked a lot in this region over the last decade or so, and I'm actually now based in Uruguay. I'm from New Zealand and employed by the New Zealand government in this capacity as the GRA representative, but I relocated about 6 weeks ago here to Montevideo. So that's why I'm interested in this region.
Fantastic. Okay, let's just go quickly through everyone else. So we have Carlos, and then we can do Hector. And I'm sorry if I get your name wrong, pero Meli, and then Akio and Jiang.
Hi, good day to everyone. Hi, Kelly. My name is Carlos Fuller. I am at the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center in Belize, and I was the substitute chair when we adopted the Coronavia program under the UNFCCC. So I want to continue to follow this process here, and how can AgMIP contribute to working with the agriculture sector within the Climate Change Convention.
Perfect, thanks. Carlos, Hector?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hector Camargo. I am a second-year PhD student in the University of Birmingham. I'm mainly working focused in Asia with LPG gas. However, I'm originally from Colombia, so I'm very interested in this region because, of course, in my future projects, I want to work in the region.
Perfect, thanks. And then I think we've got 3 more. So Meli?
Hello, everyone. My name is Meli. It's nice to meet you here. I'm a PhD student at China Agricultural University, and now I'm a visiting PhD student at UW Medicine. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Great to meet you. And then we have Akio. He's the tech. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm just I'm recording.
Okay, and then the last person is Jian, if you're here. Okay.
And you, Kelly.
Okay, I'm just going to project the questions we have for the day. So first, just a quick plug, this is the Latin America and Caribbean working group, so we don't want to leave off a very important part of our region. And as we all know, it's a really heterogeneous region, in terms of not only emissions from the agricultural sector, from 70% and above in Brazil and Uruguay, to less than 1% in some of the Eastern Caribbean states. So, a lot of different entry points. But on average, 40% of emissions in our region do come from the FOLU sector. And then there's a lot of other broader political context going on, with a lot of countries setting net zero goals for 2050. So they're developing their long-term strategies, also their NDCs coming up on the second round. There's a bunch of agricultural NAMAs being conceptualized in the region, specifically in livestock, others being explored in rice that I'm aware of. So there are a lot of things going on. And for this exercise, I thought, since there's 5 questions, but not a lot of time, I thought perhaps we could focus on the first 3, and then the last 2, maybe we can put in the chat and I can compile from there. Those are a little bit more black and white, and kind of advance that way if we don't have enough time to touch on those last 2. So just to start off, I thought we could perhaps discuss what do we think would be a key focus in the region, in terms of these kinds of modeling, adaptation, and mitigation co-benefits. What systems, what trade-offs do we want to look at? What kinds of co-benefits do we want to look at? But perhaps starting with a little bit of a characterization so that we can then move into determining how this would help in terms of policy development and incentivization of greater climate action in the sector in the region, and finishing up with, what specific projects do we think might be most beneficial to advance in the region. So opening up the floor, you can just jump in, and I will take some notes here on the side as well. So first question, how do we think, what are the key focus for the region? We could talk about, geographical, crop, or other needs. So please jump in. Go ahead, Hayden.
Thanks, Kelly. I guess one system that's key for the region is the grassland grazing livestock systems. Which probably to date not so well characterized in most models, particularly that interaction between animals and grass or pastures or forages.
Great. Okay.
I'd just like to second that and actually bring an additional dimension. I think crop livestock systems or integrated systems, mixed systems, are really something that's being looked at this interface of adaptation, mitigation, and that's really relevant as well, and that's very challenging to do in modeling. That includes intercropping, rotations, forestry, crop, livestock, and so on. Anyways.
Perhaps to expand on my grassland comment, I think the impact of climate change, including the impact of increased CO2 concentration in the atmosphere on the quality of forages, will be a very important feedback to that will, to some extent, work against our mitigation efforts, given that one of the main interventions in livestock systems is improving the diet quality. And so if climate is sort of pushing back the other way, it's going to be quite hard to do that. That'd be one thing that has to be picked up probably. And I think the other one is soil carbon on permanent grasslands. I guess we know something about the change in land cover or land uses between crop and grassland and forest land, but the effects of management on the same grassland is not very well characterized at all in terms of its soil carbon impacts.
Any other thoughts? Thoughts there? Yeah, I have to say, especially, obviously for the Southern Cone, Hayden, I mean, the grassland management, and there's actually a lot of really interesting kind of collaboration going on in the from Uruguay, but in different kind of livestock roundtables. You know, the Mesa de Ganadería sobre Campo Natural in Uruguay. There's a lot of I think we could work with the stakeholders to create a lot of interest in those sorts of modeling outputs. And a lot of concern actually right now with droughts in that area. And there's already talk actually of having a broader observatory for livestock in grasslands in the southern region, and this could potentially contribute to that. Any other thoughts? Brian, welcome. We're a pretty small group. We're just focusing on this first question about what could be a key focus for the region.
I guess rice is another system that's quite important in a number of countries in the region too. And it would be all of the issues that have been raised in the plenary discussion around rice, the effects of water management on methane, but not just methane, but also nitrous oxide impacts, which are often overlooked. And all the management, various management of rice, including residue and everything else. Yeah.
And on that note, we have been talking for quite a while with Roberto and Sonali and a couple other regions of the world of doing the integrated assessment actually of SRI, because in talking about trade-offs, the reason that, you know, for instance, from ICA, we've been working with SRI as opposed to just alternate wetting and drying is specifically because we're seeing that it decreases the trade-offs between perhaps productivity and these changes in water management through these other principles that it has. And that's something that there's some work going on in the region right now. There's another small Fontagro project we're a part of that's starting in 4 countries. And then we at ICA also support some other kind of validation and capacity building work on SRI in almost 9 countries. And so it might be something that we can build on to collect some additional data with kind of a little bit of additional support and build out this modeling process in a way that also supports, you know, the efforts we've been talking with India specifically and also Vietnam. So that might be something kind of across regions that's also a priority for this region. And several countries, Panama and Peru in particular, are working on, there's talking about and starting to set the baseline for NAMAs in rice. And also there's a lot of interesting, the entry point in Peru actually is a lot on the health aspects and the reduction in dengue and malaria. So that's another interesting angle or co-benefit that we could somehow try to consider. And there was one more thing I was going to say there. Well, anyway, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can build on there. Oh, and we've been working, you know, also with the private sector, like for instance in Colombia with Fede Arroz, which I know you guys just had the Fontagro project to start to reduce emissions. But there's quite a nice network of people that are trying to measure emissions, both nitrous oxide and methane in rice. So that would be one vote in Latin America.
I have another point would be, I mean, still on the nitrogen aspect, but more broadly, nitrogen fertilizer, you know, application. There was just a paper published last week in Nature showing about the increasing role of nitrous oxide from soils in fertilizers in Brazil, China, and India, you know, in the global budget, basically. So that's another area that's really lots of interesting aspects to explore, including the trade-offs of soil carbon sequestration and nitrous oxide fluxes, you know, the discussion on the potential unintended, you know, consequences of increasing soil carbon. So that's also very relevant for the NAMAs, for you know, and so national scale programs for that in Latin America as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and obviously the topic of soil carbon is now quite high on the agenda, specifically in Latin America, with a lot of different countries expressing, you know, at least on a political level, support for a lot of this, and some I'd say, efforts, especially particularly in the Southern Cone, to estimate soil carbon sequestration and the long-term effect kind of in grazing land cattle. And I think some modeling actually might help provide some more interesting data there. And there's also a lot of interest from the private sector, you know, Bayer and Syngenta in Latin America and other regions, but have made some significant commitments to enhancing soil carbon sequestration. And I'm assuming we'll be collecting some data that could eventually be used to inform efforts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, through the, oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask a really quick foundational question that might be obvious to everyone else in this group, but are there sort of any immediate data or MRV needs that spring to mind regionally that would help move some of these projects forwards or move us towards better connecting some of the interdisciplinary aspects and co-benefits people have raised during this workshop? Just really, really basic on
Yes.
the data and MRV stuff.
There are many. The number of countries that report emissions in agriculture at tier 2 or above is relatively few. Yeah. Some have made some moves in some source categories to sort of a tier 2, although not always a dynamic tier 2 that actually reflects changing productivity. So there's a huge need there, which means a few more country-specific emissions factors, but probably more than that is the actual activity data around the pasture quality, general terms, digestibility, protein content, etc. And also how that changes through the seasons, particularly in the tropical regions. When you have the dry wet, you have a very strong shift between digestibility between the seasons. That's lacking. I mean, there's some data in Colombia I'm aware of. There's a database, but I'm not sure how complete it is, and whether it's average values or there's an intra-annual change in the data. The soil carbon one I mentioned is a big gap to link management effects to soil carbon levels. We don't know. No country's doing it in the whole region.
Specifically on certain initiatives that I know are being pushed kind of at a political level, Claire, Mexico just submitted a proposal for a livestock NAMA to the NAMA facility. It's been actually in development for 3 years, and I think actually something like this would be really powerful in moving that forward. It's been a really I'd say it's had a really strong level of sector engagement and ownership. So both the ministries of, well, the Secretary of Agriculture and the Environment are involved. A lot of the private sector through the commission, the National Commission of Ranchers, and they have a lot of data actually on that. They have a lot of activity data that they've collected over the years. And so for me, that's another low-hanging fruit that we could consider here that will actually have a direct policy impact. The NAMA that they're proposing is a lot about, obviously, the financial kind of architecture in the country and how to incentivize these changes, but also they're prioritizing kind of 9 different sets of packages in I think, I can't remember now if it's 8 or 10 states of Mexico. So that's something that could have a potentially significant impact.
Be interesting to see if it gets funded, because livestock NAMAs are often proposals, and permanent proposals never get funded for the lack of data, right, on baseline and on mitigation potential assessments. It goes back to the same root problem, which is lack of good data.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I mean, I can't obviously speak on behalf of my colleagues, but I feel like sometimes that's an easier entry point for USDA to engage in, is helping in the data collection, capacity building, and knowledge sharing, and that sort of thing. So it'd be good to talk more about that.
Yeah, and Claire, I don't know if you're aware, but the US EPA is, well, we're sort of coordinating investment between the US EPA, New Zealand Ministry for Primary Industries, and the Australian Centre for International Ag Research to start with, but other countries, other donors, more than welcome, of course, in the whole agriculture MRV area. And we've had a number of meetings already, and we've designed kind of a stock-taking exercise around the sorts of investments that could be made. So it might be things like tools and templates, through to measurement infrastructure, through to actual research activities on the ground to generate data across a number of different geographies, including Latin America, Caribbean, Pacific, Africa, etc., Southeast Asia.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, it'd be great if you could let me know who you're talking to at EPA on that, so I can get looped in. I probably should already be aware of that, but
Tom Worth is the main contact.
Just to comment also on some ongoing projects on grassland livestock related to soil carbon. So the Brazilian Research Agency, Embrapa, has focused quite a bit, the last few years, but more recently on MRV and trying to develop a program for like low carbon beef production, so that partnering with the private sector. So that's kind of under discussion and applying more statistical approaches kind of compared to process-based modeling. Another aspect is that there's very interesting work on remote sensing and time series analysis of, above ground productivity linking to categories of pasture or grassland, because there's, estimated 50-60 million hectares of degraded pastures only in Brazil. And just a third aspect, there's also the University of São Paulo has interesting work with chronosequences in the Amazon and pastures. Some, with 70 years of time for space kind of chronosequences on soil carbon dynamics. So just some examples. That's an area of interest as well.
Great, thanks. And I see Carlos Fuller just left. I was just about to say that we also don't want to kind of forget about the Caribbean, which may not be as critical from a mitigation standpoint, but certainly is from an adaptation standpoint. And there is a lot of interest in lower emissions development there. We are starting a readiness project, a regional readiness project with 9 of the CARICOM countries that actually has a small component looking at the state of the art of current agricultural MRV and inventories in the region, and looking at how we can create kind of an action plan, a national action plans with a regional coordination to start to advance there together with the Caribbean MRV Hub. And we'll also be conducting using the TOAMD kind of an initial effort for proof of concept at looking at modeling adaptation, mitigation, and co-benefits in somewhere between 1 and 3 representative farming systems in the region. And that's something that could certainly benefit and be expanded on through this GRA and AgMIP alliance. And I think also provides a balance, because really the entry point there is adaptation. And that's, it has, but they're still being asked to mitigate. And some countries in the Caribbean actually do have a significant amount of emissions from agriculture, Guyana, Suriname. And so that might, if we can think about as a region, if we use somewhere where kind of mitigation is more the entry point, and another, like such as the livestock sector we were talking about, and then in the Caribbean, using adaptation as the entry point might be a really interesting, balance that represents more the interests and priorities in the region. I don't know, a couple of people didn't have a chance to chime in, not to throw you on the spot, but Brian or Melly, if you'd like to share any thoughts on any of these first 3 projects here. And again, remember, if you would like to make a comment about potential collaborators or roles of different organizations, please do so in the chat, because I see we only have about 10 minutes left.
Actually, I'm from Canada, and out of the choices of groups to join, I think this one would be an interesting one. So I've been a little bit quiet, but I think the area that would be of interest, and Hayden mentioned it, is the soil organic carbon, and being able to perhaps better model that. And I know there's work being carried out on that, but when we look at the US and we look at Canada, there's certainly movement towards carbon trading. And so being able to better understand how changes in that impact both yields and potential for pricing, I think is important. And it may be a little bit different from what the overall topic is here, but that's my comment.
Thank you. Great, yeah. I think before you jumped on, we were talking a little bit about soil organic carbon and the need to better model that in the region.
would say not just model, in fact, measure, because the models need the data, right, to be calibrated, and there's just a scarcity of reliable measurements of soil organic carbon done in a way that is representative at a national level to be useful for the national greenhouse gas inventories. So we're about to begin a project with 5 countries, with Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, which will take place over the next 3 years, and it will set up the methodology and the approach for a national soil carbon measurement monitoring system, so direct measurements under agricultural and livestock lands. And then on the back of that, of course, you can start to improve the models and not have to measure forever because it's too expensive, but at least have a really high quality data set on which to base improved modeling.
Hayden, are you one of the potential contacts for that modeling?
Yes, I can be, yeah. It'll be led by INEA in Uruguay through the Fontagro mechanism and with some co-funding from outside the region. But yeah, I can provide my email if you like in the chat.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Hayden. Maybe you can share again a little bit more information about that a little bit later. Okay, any thoughts on how this might contribute to policy development, or again on the focus? So just to summarize, that we talked a bit about focusing on grassland grazing livestock systems, some on mixed systems and rice, as I have that as the 3, and also looking at the soil carbon issue for measuring and monitoring. I want to make sure that I'm accurately, we've talked about some of the data available with MBRAPA and some of the existing initiatives there to build on. Anything else that we want to highlight or focus on in for our region?
I guess at a macro level, notwithstanding some interventions from governments that may try and protect and shelter different industries, I guess agriculture production systems over the next decades will be largely dictated by climate. For them to be economically sustainable, right? It's not a region that typically has huge levels of subsidy, so it's unlikely, generally speaking, that production systems that aren't suitable for the particular climatic conditions will they won't continue. So I guess it's useful for the policy development process when countries are thinking about their long-term low emissions development strategies, what the sorts of agricultural systems they will be working with in, say, 2030, 2040, 2050, and then what the implications of those different systems are for greenhouse gases at their national level, and think about the sorts of interventions that they might be making and whether they are resilient to the expected changes in climate, and also are consistent with what they are aspiring to in terms of a net zero, climate target in the long term. I guess that's the value one value from a policy perspective is giving confidence to policymakers and long-term investment.
Yeah, and to echo that, I mean, just obviously, and again, in many of the countries, it's really the co-benefits, as was mentioned on one of the panels, that countries are really going after, particularly some of the countries with less emissions from the agricultural sector that have a high, really high level of employment coming from the ag sector. And so just better understanding that and what goals they want to go after and using that to inform their insertion into the future versions of the NDCs, I think is also going to be pretty strong benefit. Any other thoughts, ideas? Any quick thoughts on then collaborating partners and roles of different organizations? Okay.
Well, when GRA can go without saying because it's a GRA jointly sponsored activity. In terms of the convening, if you like. The GRA, to be clear to everyone, itself has no funding, but it's a forum, within which we leverage resources and try and seek contributions from members and partners.
I just wanted to mention a program which is actually ending, but there's discussions on the continuation. Is basically the Climate Science for Service Partnership of the Met Office, which is working intensively in Brazil until April next year. But there'll be something, I would say, on behalf of the Met Office, it would be something that there's a lot of potential there for, especially I think what Hayden mentioned, that the climate services aspect of, both in seasonal forecasts, but also long-term projections, impact modeling, more the climate impacts aspect. So yeah, I'll be glad to kind of keep in touch about that from the Universal Leads Met Office kind of link on that. Yeah.
Thanks. That's great. And just on behalf of ICA, we have offices in every region in the country, and we are trying to work very closely with policymakers to ensure that their decisions on adaptation and mitigation planning are better informed. And so we are very interested in also supporting this and, if possible, using it to strengthen some of the investment being made in the region and building on the ongoing projects that we or our partners have. Okay, any last thoughts? Would anybody in particular like to give a brief wrap up in the next session? If not, I'm happy to do it. Okay, so thank you all. Our time is up, so we have to go back to the last session. I'm looking for the link here in case you don't have it. Let's see. But thank you all for contributing to this discussion. And here is the link to go back. Let's see. Okay, I just put it in the chat. If you'd click on that, we'll see you back in the next room. And thank you for your contributions. I'll be summarizing and will be included in the final report. Oops. There we go. All right, see you back there.
See you.